Welcome everyone to Digital Virtuosity, Teams virtual conference. You're very welcome and thank you for joining. And thank you for joining as well in this session where we're going to look at how customer experience and customer data can be brought together, particularly having a look at the differences of how client-side, server-side can really support that initiative. I'm glad you could join me today. I'm David Morris, I'm Global VP Solution Consulting for Telium. We're going to go through this topic together and look forward to hearing from you after the event as well. Well, I think one of the things that we are all very aware of is just the level of expectation and how it is rising, particularly as more and more of our consumers and customers are engaging with us digitally. And in the digital realm, the expectation of experience and wonder is just accelerating and keeping on going. And I think sometimes that is partly to do with us telling everyone that we want to give them a better experience. And so we raise the expectations ourselves. But I also think that just the natural way in which the use of digital has evolved over time, people are looking for the right experience there that maybe they used to get when they went to bricks and mortar more often than they do now. So we've got this rising expectation, and we obviously want to meet that challenge. Now, meeting that challenge, and I think that's a fairly good word as well in some respects, is because there are things that are going on in the industry which weren't a thing to consider maybe 5 years ago, and definitely something that is front of mind both for ourselves as marketeers, for analysts, for data architects, for consumers, for brand owners. There are now different facets that are going on in our industry that we need to be really mindful of. One of those is how we consider the use of data when we want to use it to be able to communicate with our customers effectively, thinking about customer experience there, but having different regulatory compliance much more prominent and obviously required, and so we'd want to, in each of the regions that we operate in. And if we're multinational, we'll have different ones in different regions. But that regulatory compliance is essential for us to not only adhere to, but also, in reality, to be able to show our consumers that the level of trust that they are looking for can be honoured by ourselves. Another part of that is very much how, as in digital marketing and digital advertising, we have historically been able to communicate with consumers based on who they are from a range of technology types. And one of the key ones in the past has always been third-party cookies. And I say the past because we will see by end of 2022 that they will be in the past. And that mechanism for understanding who the person is in a broad way is going to need to find a new home. And there's lots of communication and lots of conversations and tactics coming out of the woodwork right now. But third-party cookies are going away, and we need to think about how we're going to continue with our digital marketing and digital advertising efforts as we have to adapt the way in which we remember and recognize an individual. And on top of that, we have a range of browser changes where they are taking on more responsibility of their own in how content is consumed and what is permitted when using a web browser. And very often you see ad blocking appearing or being used widely as well by consumers. And in that as well, mobile is much more prominent when it comes to the use of IDs and the recognition that those IDs exist. A lot more of this is getting brought to the front for individuals that use their digital devices to be aware of those things. And so that awareness means that they also want to know whether it's the right thing for them to do. And then finally, we see a lot of advertisers obviously spending significant portions of their budget in walled gardens where they do advertising. And we also have publishers who want to maximize the yield from the traffic they get through that as well. And that walled gardens is really expanding as we see more and more of first-party data being recognized as a primary asset. Leveraging that and making that available through advertising and inventory is becoming all the more important, and it is being utilized much wider in that way as well. So these changes are coming across to us that we need to be mindful of when we think about our strategy for talking to our consumers using the information that they have shared with us. So what is the way forward? If we're looking at changes which have resulted in us maybe having to be more thoughtful and maybe sometimes feel more restricted in what we can do because of regulation, or unable to use technical mechanisms we used to be able to in order to be able to recognize somebody in a fluid manner. Or what do we do about that? How do we make sure we engage in the right way with our digital advertising, our digital marketing, and onward from there? Well, obviously, there is an option to give up, but I'm sure none of us on this session are interested in doing that. We can find workarounds, and particularly where there are technical changes in how we operate as marketeers and advertisers and publishers, we have looked and still look for workarounds that allow us to continue in the vein and we are currently working in. And they can make us feel like the tail is wagging the dog a little bit because we're constantly having to move to the next workaround. And that's because it would be if that's the constant approach that we took. But we can find a longer term strategic view, and that is to consider the fact that first party data, the data that we collect under consent for the purposes of providing a good experience to our customers, that first party data is something that can be a true asset from a user's perspective for them and for us as a brand as well. So we're going to have a look about how first party data can really drive great customer experiences and long-term customer engagement. So as we move to it, and moving to it is vital, we should consider a number of things that make that so. One of those is being able to provide scalable customer acquisition. So we're very mindful that when we did a wide scattergun of customer acquisition through third-party data, we would find that we get a broad stroke of people coming in, and then the funnel of activity that came through to our kind of first-party website, wherever it might be, would then have the genuine context around it, and then we move on. And that's fantastic. And as we move to a more first-party way of doing things, we need to see how we can apply scalability to that, whether through technology or partnerships with other people, in order to broaden the reach that we can make with first-party data. And that is a vital aspect of what we are doing, and a vital aspect of what Tedium can provide and support. Now, improving time to insight is an interesting conversation to have. I think one of the reasons why it can be a real focus when you have first-party data strategy is because you have much more information at your fingertips that is something that you own and can control under the consent that your consumers have given you. And because you have that ownership and control there, you're able to apply much more rigorous insights into data that you can trust, using either internal teams or your agencies, and then bringing that insight into technologies that you can acquire and put in place that allow you to apply the insight really, really fast directly into where you are making action and decision making right there. So having that improved time to insight can really be shortened because you're using data that you own. And then thirdly, we obviously need to be able to govern the data and how it's used. And I've been talking about consent already and mentioning it. But that is essential to understand, both as a business, are we being good stewards of the data that we've been entrusted with? But also, can we show that to those who would ask us whether we have done so, and be able to show that with confidence as well? So moving to that first-party data strategy is vital, and these are some of the core things we need to be mindful of that, as we move there. So one of the ways in which we would move through to a first-party data strategy is to support that strategy as well with technology. And it's not the only part we need to think about. There's obviously other facets outside of technology as well. And I'm looking forward to just talking about that later on. But one of the ways in which we can do that is with technology that is designed with purpose to support our customer experience initiatives using customer data, first-party customer data. And a customer data platform is built and designed to do exactly that. Now, there are different flavors of customer data platforms, some which are built from the ground up to achieve that, some which were built for a different purpose initially and have been adapted many times successfully. But customer data platforms are right there in the center of your technology strategy in order that your customer data can be brought together and then carefully but fluidly able to be able to share with the technologies, the tools, and the teams that wish to use it for those customer experience tactics and strategies they wish to deploy. And having it from the center in the middle means that all those who receive it on the edge are able to feel confident that they are having the same information and working off that same hymn sheet almost amongst all the other ways in which the rest of their teams are working together. So we want technology to support it. We've got a strategy in place that we wish to move forward with. And one of the key things that I mentioned earlier was around third-party cookies and recognition of somebody. And really, this is where a customer data platform and a first-party strategy kind of really come together. We've always seen that we would be able to understand who somebody is through anonymous means. They move to more recognizable through unknown IDs like first-party cookies, session values, whatever it might be. More to known as we get IDs that are more about them individually, through to all the way through to a customer. And this is very much like any kind of relationship or friendship that you develop with an actual person, and that is that you get to know them more as more is shared over time. And in reality, you wouldn't want to skip too many of these steps. It would feel a bit awkward maybe. And I think that's where we as marketeers, as brand owners, we can really focus on, as we build up this understanding of our customers, we do it in a way that is more natural for a consumer relationship with a brand. And that might mean that we have to take these number of steps. The important thing is, though, that we use technology that allows us to not lose context as we go through each of these stages. And you can find that you might hear like people phrase it in your business as, we have lots of data silos. And that's because you'll often find that different stages of this consumer journey are captured inside different technologies, and they end up only having their own context, and therefore it's not all brought together. Something a customer data platform is there to look to solve. So as different IDs get more available, we need to be mindful of ensuring that our customers are willing to share that with us, because those are there and really important for us to be able to then give a good consumer experience or customer experience back to them, because we do recognize who they are. They have been willing to tell us that, and we should have a way of remembering that robustly and provide that experience. So as I said, remembering them really comes down to collecting it and then bringing it into one place. So let's have a look at the collection part. Collection part can be covered in two different ways. And I mentioned right at the beginning, we can have a look at client side and server side. And the client side part of that can come from a collection standpoint, is often what we call client side tagging. So that's essentially putting tags on your website or your mobile app. Those are the client side devices, anything that a consumer has or uses in their hands, as it were, to communicate with you digitally. And the tagging allows you to be able to share information to other digital providers like ad tech or analytics or personalization, so that they can provide a good service and ultimately customer experience to those who are on your web page, etc. So that's what they're designed to do. They're often there for use for tracking as well. And they can also be sent over to server side, which we'll talk about in just a second. Now, that is pretty classic, and tag management as a technology type is well established and almost a foundational bit of technology you'd expect to have in your business. And it provides a wide range of capabilities and advantages, but some of them are worth mentioning, which is particularly around ease of implementation. All that tagging and tracking can take a lot of admin up, take a lot of resources within your business, particularly technical ones, which may be at a premium particularly as well. And it offers that ease of implementation when you look at client-side tracking that allows you to do that at scale and keep a good return on investment from the technology you purchase by getting good data then quicker, so that you can get the best out of them faster. And obviously when you do that, it's not just what do they click on right now that I want to share with someone, but also the context around the page, around often the person, and maybe the environment they are part of at the time of the tracking itself as well. That contextual data in the page provides great value to us as we look to do both analytics, insight, and ultimately action based on that data. And then thirdly, lower cost. I talked about having resources in-house that might often have to do this without something or some kind of tooling that supports client-side tracking, and lowering the cost by allowing them to do other projects and be able to use resources that are at premium in other ways allows you to reduce the cost down for yourselves. So when to use client-side tracking? Well, there's a range of reasons why you would want to do that, particularly around when the technologies that you're using for customer experience need to be in the device, so in the mobile app or in the browser, web browser, because that's where they operate and where they do things in the moment. So you might find you talk to technology vendors who say, I need our SDK to be in your app because that's where all the clever stuff is happening right there in the moment, and we'll be able to gather the data from what's going on, and we need it in the app at the time. Or it might be A/B testing or heat mapping, and certainly conversion tags, which are slowly moving to server side, or in some cases very quickly for some brands and some vendors. But all of these ones here are reasons why you would remain client side, as opposed to thinking I can just ditch client side completely. So all of those things play a part. Now, what about server side? Well, server side tagging is really where you send information either from digital environments or from non, so bricks and mortar, call center, IVR systems, CRM, anything else further than that. It might be inventory data that you've got, campaign data, and you can bring this all in one place by sending it both from the client into server side, but also directly from other offline environments. And by doing that, it means that you can then send the information to lots of different vendors as well, but do so without relying upon the browser or without relying upon the restrictions that occur there, being able to have a more fluid kind of almost data sharing relationship. And there are certain environments as well, particularly around analytics, machine learning, that they require the data to be sent to them server side. So being able to do that at scale is very important, particularly when you're thinking about that insight to action loop that you're trying to shorten. So by having full funnel visibility, and what does that mean? Well, I think you can see that as a ability for you to be able to bring in that offline data like CRM and that online data for being able to understand digital engagement. And after all, wouldn't you want to have a full view of how I came to your site and ultimately purchased something? You'd want to know that it looked great that I had 3 visits and 2 of them came from social and one was a natural landing. But wouldn't it be more important as well to understand that actually that walk into your store or that quick 2-minute call with your call center right in the middle of that journey was really what triggered me to move forward? That helps you to understand what kind of engagement you should be looking to offer and support to other customers that are halfway through that journey. So that full funnel visibility is really a great advantage for server-side tracking. Another one is that strength in the data sharing. I mentioned that about sending it into analytics environments. So you may well have stood up something in a cloud environment where you've got all your data going in there. It needs to be sent in server-side. It needs to be done in a scalable way. And providing server-side tracking technologies means that you are able to do that without having to stand it all up yourself and not have that technical debt. But that strength in the data sharing really supports your ability to get the right data into those teams right at their fingertips and be able to get the insight back out. And I talked about data control around data governance a little earlier, but when you have it all server-side, it means you have it all available, even from a definition point of view, in one place. And so that data control and that quality of data control can be done all together in one place in advance of both kind of distribution and to other places, but also in advance of before being able to then send it on to other vendors. So when to go server side? Well, first of all, if third-party cookies are a big part of what you rely upon, and then other IDs will be coming into play, and they're going to be looked to be getting sent server-side more and more to both ad tech and martech vendors. So you should be thinking about server-side from that perspective alone. But there's other advantages as well around performance, around removing reliance upon the various restrictions that might be inside browsers, for example, or it might well be that the data that you wish to share is highly sensitive and you need to send it server-side from the beginning. So there is a thought, obviously, about, okay, well, maybe I should just switch from one to the other. But when would I need to use both of those to ensure that the good collection I'm getting is supporting the data strategy that I need in order to be able to provide a customer experience based upon that rich information? Well, one of those is obviously if you bring it all together and using both, so that's client-side tracking and information from offline elsewhere into one place. It's not just about the collection, but it's also about the remembering, which I mentioned earlier. It's about the recognition over time. And that's when you want to build a comprehensive visitor profile, or the 360 view, as some people have often shared with it. And I think, we maybe don't love that 360 view term anymore because it had so much like legacy view around it. But we are in this age now where technology actually is there to support us genuinely and be able to achieve this. And that comprehensive visitor profile is an essential component to providing customer experience based upon that data. And bringing it together by being able to recognize somebody cross-device, cross-channel, that kind of breadcrumb approach I talked about earlier, is really important to be able to have confidence in when you go out and communicate with your consumers based upon that. Some of the other reasons might be performance as well. So I'll give you a quick example. If you're using personalization tools, you can obviously share the information they need on the page, so they pick it up as they go, and they provide treatment in the page. And that's a long-term strategy that's always been in place. But as we have evolved and moved to server side, it gives us opportunities to, one, share data that would be hard to get to the page first, but also share data directly with them server side, allowing them to have that information ready to go before the page is loaded up. And that can provide some performance optimizations and improvements as well around your customer experience on the treatments you're doing for your personalization. And then when we think about the kind of information we're gathering, at one point we're doing collection of data. It's all kind of interaction data, so event level data. But when we apply this to the same person, using that range of IDs that we're collecting, and when we bring it together, we're now turning it into user level information, so person level information. And by doing that, we're then able to have a person level conversation. It's very common that you see where people say, okay, I've got all the data together, and when someone does something, I'm going to trigger sending an email. And that sounds exactly what we kind of things we want to do. But we need to do it in the context of the person, not just the action they just did. And so having that user level information in a customer data platform is there exactly how you can support that. And finally, I mentioned about getting data from web and mobile. That's coming in directly into the server side from client, bring the server side in together. And then by having that web and mobile joined up means that we can then provide an experience that people recognize, that we can see that they are the same person, and we can use IDs from that as part of our strategy. So what does that look like as an example? Well, we've got our consumer, so that's me on the left there. I come to your website. We are going to use a tag management system. Tedium provides one called IQ. It's part of what gets loaded into the browser and allows us to then collect and then distribute information out through pixels to the various technologies that we use. Obviously, along the way, we have a gate there around consent to ensure that what we're about to send, we're allowed to send, whether that be particular data points or to particular vendor types. And then after that as well, rather than saying, okay, we're going to send it client side, we can say, actually, let's move it into a server side delivery and collection capability. We'll send it into something like Event Stream that Tedium provides, that allows you then to bring that all together as a single stream of information and send it server side again to exactly the same vendors, all of which are keen to be able to receive it server side from a scalable point of view for them as well. So you can kind of see it as a bit of a pick and mix, I guess, and deciding when to use what is important, because after all, we want to be able to flex. And we need to be able to flex because some vendors will say we need it client side, and some will say we need it server side. And we kind of find ourselves halfway between the two. And the reason for that, quite simply, is this evolution through the server side just takes time for people, for processes, and for technologies to adapt to that. And so there'll be different levels of speed of change. And that's why I would always say that you should find yourself in a position where you have that flex so that you are ready as the evolution is going along and you are able to adapt as it does that. And being able to adapt quickly, after all, is the very thing we need to do because our consumers are always changing. Their interests and their needs are changing. We talked about the acceleration of their expectation. And that ability to flex and be adaptable means that we are able to give that better customer experience. So when we think about customer experience, it's not just the processes or the people or the technology on their own, it's all three. And when we think about the technology, very often in the past, we might have said, oh, you know what, if we buy this quick bit of tech and we put some data in real quick in our team in isolation, we'll get some great results and we're just going to go gung-ho with that. And that's absolutely a valid thing to do, except that you now want to work off a centralized data strategy, and you can't be in isolation on that one particular tool. You have to be considerate and thinking about the other technologies working in your business, the other teams that are doing that. And if you're honest with yourself, you've watched a bunch of superhero movies, they're never really on their own. There's always a team actually around them, whether they want to accept it or not sometimes. And then the other part of that is being able to recognize just how we make sure that that internal kind of skill set, the abilities that we have within our business and our teams are fully utilized. And by having centralized information about the consumer available on tap, on demand, and sent to everybody who needs it, we're ensuring that they can focus on the tools that they are using for the strategies and tactics that they are focusing on, but relying upon the same data as their peers, and ensuring that they are then be able to maximize and use their skills to the fullest. And that's really important, because if we had lots of different silos, yes, they'd be able to work on their own data, but they wouldn't be able to maximize how they could work together with each other. And that's what we really gain the benefit from. And then finally, those processes need to adapt. So it may be that you used to have business units that were quite happy and could work independently, but now that we've got centralized data, there's the advantages that they can have by coordinating, and because they can actually coordinate around the same information. And so ensuring that anything around maybe working together first on one thing before the next thing happens might need to be added into your processes, but ultimately being able to adopt these new practices allows your business to recognize that it's still the customer that comes first. So that focus that I talked about, it does need adapting. So think about how you may have been able to do things in isolation in certain silos, and now you have broken those silos down to some extent. You want to be able to collaborate more. And it doesn't just need to be the teams that are working with that information and running the tactics and the campaigns, but it needs to be those in leadership who are there, coordinated and aligned and focused on those data practices to be there from the top all the way through their business. So you may find as your business scales, if they haven't already, that you're going to start seeing new roles in your business. Like you might see a chief data officer. You might see more technology team members in your marketing function. This is all to try and bring data as a focus back into your business. And that's why you'll see that the cyclical nature of using customer data comes into play. Because after all, we do one project, we learn, we get the insights, that loops back, and we adapt. And that's why it's good to see that it's an adaptable project and something we can really enjoy as well when we do that. So when you think about how that all comes together and what is considered success, I think it's good to recognize that there'll be lots of small successes along the way, and we should applaud that. But ultimately, when we have trust from our consumers and a regular rate of return, we are seeing that the customer experience that we have given them is ideal for them and ideal for our customer relationship. So thank you very much indeed for listening. I hope you enjoy all the rest of the sessions that we have at Digital Virtuosity. Bye for now.